Oh, look at that. We're live. Hold on. I didn't even play my song. I'm going to. I don't care. What is up? The Bearded Gang, Beard of Darkness book reviews back with uh, a poorly timed link, but we're here nonetheless. And I see all the lovely people over there in the chat. The reason it was poorly, well, my sister came down. I'm going to blame it on her. She came up from Tennessee. I'm going to blame it on her. And that's why I put the link up a little bit late. But nonetheless, we're here. My man Corey Ratliff, how you doing tonight, brother? Hey, literally looking like my brother. My dad thought we were brothers, and he's like, I don't have a kid named Corey, and he's like, I thought we were. That's your brother, dude.
Or the balded Buckeyes.
Right? How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm not doing too bad. I'm trying to stay cool, trying to stay busy.
Dude. So, are you? I know you grew up around. Where I live now. I live in Chillicothe, Ohio. You grew up in like the Portsmouth area. Where are you now?
For a few years.
Where are you now?
I'm way up northwest now. I'm about 2 miles from the Indiana line. People always ask like, "Where are you from?" And I say, "Do you know where Lima's at?" Lima's always a pretty big one. I'm about 45 minutes from Lima, but Lima's usually where I work. I'm about halfway between Lima and Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's the two biggest cities.
We're still not that far. We have to do something, man. Seriously, because
we're only like 2.5 hours apart.
Yeah, absolutely. My sister, she came. I'm trying to mess with my green screen game is just not been the best. But hey, we're doing it. We're doing it. So, my sister came up from Tennessee. And just came up and kind of like I knew about it, but it was like I don't pay attention to the dates well enough to like, it's just one of those. I gotta get better at it.
That's funny because my brother lives in Tennessee right now.
Where at?
I'm not exactly sure what town, but he's stationed out of Kansas, so they're like 2 miles from the Kansas line.
Okay,
they got a place in Tennessee, so.
Now, her husband is the reason they're there. They're in Fort Campbell, so they've been there twice now. They own a home and stuff there now. But the hell, they've been to like, where else have they been? Alaska, North Carolina.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they've been everywhere, dude. So he just got back from. Where the hell did he get back from? We were just talking about it. Right next to you.
I'll tell you what. I'll It's hotter than hell here lately, but I'll take this if we're going to Alaska.
Oh, see, I don't know, man. It's been it was like 98 today in Ohio. What is up with that?
I know. I think something's flipped. I was looking the other day. It was like 97, and I looked at Houston, Texas, and we were hotter in Houston.
Yes.
Something broke.
Who was I believe. I don't remember who I was talking to the other day. I was like, man, it's got to be hotter where they're at because, like, in Ohio, it's 98. And they're like, no, it's like 70 here. I'm like, you bastard. But no, man. So just so everybody knows, I hope she's okay, man. Like, I haven't talked to her. I'm sure she is. Probably just slipped her mind. But Shelly Campbell wasn't here. She's supposed to be hanging out with us tonight. Haven't been able to get a hold of her. Shelly Campbell is the artist who we're going to kind of be talking about. She is amazing, and she's an amazing author too. Holy crap, dude. She can write. So I was supposed to be not only talking to this wonder. Look at you, dude. There it is. Full screen. There it is. Get that bald head bigger, dog. Yes. All right. So she was supposed to be here too. The next time that she's available, we'll have her on. We'll have you guys back. Maybe kind of like an episode 2, if you will. But we'll really just kind of start here. We'll kind of start like people who may not be privy with your series, and then we'll get in a little deeper. So kind of just start with the Elmerian series, kind of an overview, how many books are out, and kind of the names and the genre.
Okay, so Elmerian Chronicles is an epic fantasy. It's starting to become called dark epic fantasy because it's borderline grimdark,
It
but
it is.
it does get darker as it goes on, but I like it that way. And
Yeah.
I wanted to write something that was more okay. To go back to the beginning, I grew up, and when I was like 12, 13, I fell in love with The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, and that was my favorite series forever until I picked up The Bound and the Broken. So
Mm.
regardless, still my two favorite series ever are Dragon Riders. So before I ever started really getting into anything other than Christopher Paolini, I wanted to write a Dragon Rider series. But as I started writing it, I wanted to lean more into the brutality of war. I wanted my characters to be adults, already kind of had a little bit of a life ahead of them before this, before the series started. Especially my main character, I didn't want him to be a teenager that's kind of having to learn everything and be bigger than what they already are. I
Kind of
wanted somebody that
angsty.
was already, yeah, I wanted somebody that was already confident in what they were and kind of had their life going for them, and then had that shit like completely flipped. And then that's what happens with Auric. He's a sentinel. He spent half his life, 16 years, as a sentinel. He's a very good soldier. And just spoiler alert, he gets chosen by a dragon, but when he does, it throws him completely on a different path that he was never prepared for, never thought was possible. And so I've taken a character that was competent and confident, and then now I've taken him into a place that is uncomfortable, it's new, and on top of just being a dragon mage, he learns that half the world wants to kill him and half the world wants to use him.
Mm.
So that's kind of how the first book he really starts getting into it.
So
There's
pause
a
real quick.
prophecy that
Pause real. I want to say this because my brother-in-law is funny, man. He's in the army, and that's the reason my sister's in Tennessee. And I can't believe I didn't say it because this is like top of the respect chain for me, man. My man Corey is a veteran and was in the army, so he knows a lot about what he's writing about, especially when it comes to kind of the brutality of war. And it's funny, my brother-in-law, who I saw today, who's still in the army, he's reading Paolini right now. He's reading, I believe,
yeah.
it's the Green Book. Inheritance.
That's the final one, yeah, Inheritance.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's deep in that.
I got that book. My wife sent me that book when I was in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And I was put on a night shift, and I was in a truck for 12-hour shift, and I read
Is
it
that
in
what you
one
did?
sitting.
Was kind of convoy?
So we were kind of like fob security, like the little base we was on, the forward operating base, and our company was kind of a mishmash company that kind of got thrown together for deployment. We spent 3 months training to guard the prison, and
There he
then
is. That's my brother-in-law right
after
there.
I
Right there.
and so we trained on fob or on prison guard. We spent 3 months doing that. We went down to Camp McGregor, got pepper sprayed, tasered, all kinds of shit like that. And then we got in Afghanistan and we got boots on ground, and they were like, mission change. You're not going to be fob security. So this unit that I was part of, probably more than half were not combat MOSs. They were not combat job
Sure.
specific. So then it fell on the other of us to kind of high speed train them up on combat missions, fob security, some QRF, running the entry control points, things like that. And that's what we did a lot of. And then just a few missions here and there. But
Nonetheless, you have the reason there's two reasons real quick before you kind of go back into your story, man, about your books. I bring it up for one. There's probably not a job in this world that I respect more than a man or a woman that puts themselves in harm's danger for the freedom that we love to do what we're doing today, and that's talking and doing what the hell we want, right?
Yep.
And not only that, I think it has a lot to say. So if I'm looking for a series to read, especially when it comes to what is important to you, the brutality of war, that's something that you have knowledge of firsthand. So I think that plays a huge role in so many people choosing a series to read. I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Now,
but I felt that that was a very important point to make.
thank you. So like I like to, I like to say that I like to lean into brutality, war, and things like that. And I in reality, I got really lucky on our deployment. Despite being in Afghanistan, like we were relatively safe. Like all of our guys came home, all of the girls came home.
What year?
Um, it was 2012.
Okay, yeah.
So okay,
If you went in
so
like 2004, 2005, that's a different story,
yeah,
right?
yeah, a lot different story. But I got to see what I come to understand about war is not so much the battles themselves. My battle scenes, my big action scenes, which a lot of people really like, that comes from my love of being a nerd and I trained in martial arts for a long time, plus going in the military. So I learned and studied a lot of combat.
Mm,
But what I really learned in the brutality of war is the part that people don't really see or think about, and that's the aftermath. It's the
mm.
aftermath on both sides of the war, not just your side, but on
What
both sides of it.
aspect?
And you start to
Like mentally,
loss,
physically, environmentally?
yeah, yeah, all of it. So you get to see that the kind of changes that people go through when they lose their family, when they lose their
Oof.
loved ones, when they lose their homes, when you have people like the Taliban that come in and basically just steal the show over there. Like they in Afghanistan, they would say they had two governments. They had the day government, which was the elected officials, and then the night government. And the night government was Taliban, and you could just see the change. And it's like people flipped a switch when it came
Mm,
nighttime, and they knew that the Taliban were in charge.
wow.
Um, so to see that kind of that level of oppression and just constant danger, a lack of technology from brutality from thousands of years of war in that region,
Mm,
you get to see the minimalistic style of life that people live over there, and yet they can
wow.
still find joy in things like that. And so I like to explore a lot of the aftermath of war, a lot of the loss, a lot of the changes, and what war really does to a region or to a group of people. Um,
It's very
and then a
interesting.
big theme in my books is that when you're going into the military and you learn a lot about your enemy, and at first everyone seems like they could be the enemy, and then
Mm,
you start, like, especially over there, you start learning that a lot of them they're good people. They're actually really good people. And then one thing will happen. One of them will attack a soldier, and it's like the whole country just gets this shroud of darkness and hatred over it. And you sit back and you think, in hindsight, it's like we're so easy to blame a group based off of one or
the
a smaller
race.
group's individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big theme I explore in my books, with my orcs, with my elves, my humans, all of them at some point in the thousands of years of my story, they have, um, they've really crossed the line somewhere. Some of them have, and everybody just goes, "Oh, the orcs did that. They're monsters." And then my books opens up with an orc raid, and I purposely make you see the brutality of orcs.
Instantly.
But then, you get about halfway into the book, and then you start seeing the orc side, their garrison side, their families, and their culture, and you realize that maybe they're not so bad people. They are a warring nation, they're a warring faction, but they're not bad people.
It's hard to so again, I've never been in the military. This is just kind of what I've got the impression from people who have been in the military or in battles. Like there's always two sides, and it's often when you take a step back. And what I mean when I say that is, like, I watch a lot of podcasts like Sean Ryan show,
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
he'll have a lot of guys that come on. It's like once I took a step back, it's like, for instance, I'll tell a story. I won't say names or anything like that. A gentleman had killed somebody, uh, and this was in front of his children. And it's like, did I just create two? Did I just corrupt two more minds? Like, did his children see what happened to his father, and now I've disabled that part of their brain to even consider the reason I'm here? You know what I mean? Did I just create two more monsters? And that's all. Like, so I think that that's a very important part to put in, and that's the reason I love fantasy. It's like, sure, when people hear the word fantasy, they're like, it's all made up. But look, when you actually read it, the themes, the topics, they're all so relatable. And I think what you're talking about is
fantasy.
It's just that.
Yeah, I like to think that fantasy, especially indie fantasy, tends to explore various cultures and in depth and show more than, say, something that feels maybe more realistic. Like, sure, it's fantasy, but especially when you get to epic fantasy, when you get into epic fantasy and you have these, this deep, rich history that an author has built, and you see how exactly what you're saying right there. There's a theme I'm playing with, and I won't spoil too much, but it comes up in book 4 that I'll be writing next year.
Yeah.
And it is that very same concept of, did I just create the same type of monster that I am?
Man,
And
how could you not?
that definitely comes up. Yeah, and
it
that is a cultural thing. That is a generational thing. How long does it take how many generations does it take to break, toxic habits of your ancestors and open your eyes and see the world for what it actually is, instead of, this is what I was taught and this is what it is.
Yeah. So one thing on that is, like, we have seen evidence of, like, those toxic things you said. So we'll say racism, or because look, there's not a single person in this world, whether you're gay, straight, it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, what your skin color is. Like, everybody starts off the same to me. It's the depth of your character. It's whether you give me the same respect as I give you. Like, it's so much deeper than skin, dude, and sexuality, dude. And I think that is finally, like, coming across to so many more people, because for a long time it was like, it was, especially in the United States, if you were black, it was like, before the Civil War, it was like terrible segregation and stuff like that. It has come a long way, but I think there's always room for improvement. So there's always room for people to be talking about those things.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that's explored in a lot of fantasy. And even if it's not a difference of race, even just region, like, oh, you're from that city, like, we don't deal with you at all, and we're gonna hunt you down and everything else. But and they could be,
there's a lot of, in certain big cities there is that. Like, for the one that comes to mind instantly is like Chicago. For guys like us who get to hear about. I'm trying to point the camera, guys. Sorry about that. Hold on. Let me fix my chair real quick. I think that's it. There it is. There we are. All right. So in Chicago, you hear about, like, the north side and east side, lots of violence, man. And it's just like, what has to happen for these big themes? That the reason I'm bringing it up is because you talk about it in your books. It's like, what has to happen for these people to come together? It's incredible to me, the amount of like the weight and the stock people put in, like, pushing themselves away from each other rather than, like, bringing each other together. There's so many factors, but what you're covering, man, is a big theme.
I like the analogy of casting a stone in the ocean. So if you cast a stone in a large body of water, it sends out ripples. And those ripples can carry something that's floating in any direction, but it always tends to go in the direction that is in the path from the stone that was thrown. But if you throw another stone that is in a different direction, then you can send whatever's floating in a different direction completely. And I think that is something that is kind of akin to generational changes. You know,
Yeah.
you don't just listen to what your parents have told you and everything like that. Once you get old enough, you go out, you learn about the world a little bit, you do your own
You make
research,
your own mind up.
you make your own choices. And when you have children, you can teach them better than what you were taught. You can
Oh
teach
yeah.
them to accept better than what you were taught to accept, to be more open minded than your parents were. And
Ah,
I think, and that's something big I like to play with too. And
I
that'll
think that
really come.
having that mindset, what you just said, and if you had parents that had, like, I have parents that have a great mindset. Like, I don't have a parent that hates anything, but if you are the same as me, it's like maybe you can take some of the love that you kind of felt from your parents and grow on that. Or if you had
Yeah.
parents that or uncles or whatever influenced you uh, in that kind of negative way, you can grow on that. Um,
Hmm.
I know that Timothy asked a question about. You said you're a student of the martial arts. What
Hmm.
martial art?
I did a Shori Goju karate for. I started up when I was 14, and then I kind of stopped when I got back in Afghanistan. I was 21, so
Okay,
about 7 years of that.
man,
Um, I still practice it here and there, but I just never really
well,
went
you're a
back to
working
school any
man.
of
You
it.
got a wife
I
and
kind of
kids.
that, and I opened my mind up to a lot more of mixed martial arts and other
Ooh,
traditional martial arts, just to it kind of expand my own mind and things like that.
yeah, man. I think that's great, and a lot of that's. I love that a lot of that's coming to like what you would say is popular in our society, man. I think Dana White is doing a wonderful job of representing all sorts of different kinds of martial arts.
Yeah,
Isaac says, "Which fantasy do you like to write the most?"
I'd say epic. Um, I'd say a year ago I would have said classic, straight up just classic fantasy, classic epic. But I've the more I write in the series, the darker I like to write. The darker books that I like to read. Like this year, I just picked up the first Law trilogy, um,
Dude, I seen
and
you been digging that, man. It's good. I
yeah,
just told my
Kurt and
brother-in-law to
Gill.
pick up the blade.
Yep, it was. I went straight through the first three books,
Ah,
and
yeah.
ever since then, I have started other books that were lighter. They were classic fantasy. They were traditional fantasy, and they felt too light in tone for me. So I've been
So, is it
digging
how
into.
realistic the dark stuff is? Like, it's like for me, I have to speak from experience. Like when I read, I'm pointing up because that's where my bookshelf is. It's like
Hmm.
Joe Abercrombie brings me that like
Yeah,
3 a.m. when I'm reading.
there.
He just brings me this chuckle, dude. He is hilarious in the darkest ways, though.
Yeah, and that I mean that I'd like to lean a little bit of that into my military sense of humor. We
Yeah.
tend to
Oh,
have a
you
dark
got to,
sense of
right?
humor, but it's so popular across so many different people, and I think there is a level of reality to it, and maybe that's what it is. Um, there's a lot of good in the world, there's a lot of light in the world, but at the same time, there's a lot of darkness, and I think too many people don't accept that there is. They just try to shower it with, butterflies and oh, it's not that bad.
Well, what's hard to deal? So I have to bring up an example. Like my dad was a paramedic, right? And I remember
Hmm.
one night specifically, like there was a child involved, and like, or maybe it was a suicide, something like that, and it was something really hard to deal with, right? Uh,
Yeah.
what's easier to do, like sulk in your room, or let's try to make the best out of what is a terrible situation so that I can
Hmm.
deal with it mentally better, right?
I see. Like I know what the right answer is, but for me, that easier choice is to bury it. That's just
No, that is the
that's
easier
how that's how
choice.
that's how I've been for most of my life. I was a pretty angry kid, and
But you know where that
maybe that
goes.
yeah, yeah, it 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 tears myself down is what it does.
Oh, Dude,
And
it festers, dude. It festers and
yeah,
festers, and then one day you blow up at your kids or your wife or your dad or your mom,
yeah,
somebody you love incredibly, and you're like, "Whoa, what's going on?"
yeah. And I think I did it for so long and so much that it became so natural for me to do it that like even now, like if I do it, I don't, that lid never cracks. I never blow up anymore. It just kind of festers and then it burns away. And at some
My
point, I
guy
think at
EL.
some point in my life, it's gonna build and build and build. But
Ah, for me, real quick, EL, I'm gonna get to your question real quick. I'm gonna put it down, but I'm gonna bring it back up. My moderator, EL Montague, my guy. Um, he, for me, man, I noticed like when I applied to be, I went through MEPS
mhm.
and got, I was gonna sign with the Air Force, and
Oh
when
yeah,
I found out I had Crohn's disease, instant like turn away, right? Like, nope, zero
yeah,
chance that you'll ever have a chance, never. And I went through a super dark period, and that's probably the beginning for me because I was on drugs for probably 10 years. Like, I'm
yeah,
sober now, but like, just that's where my festering went.
yeah,
And it's good to notice where your festering leads you. And when I say
yeah.
fester, I mean putting those emotions deep down. And again, I'm relating this back to the fact that you bring it up in your book, man. Because I think that so many people can. For me, I have to speak personally. I do think so many people will read uh, your series. Again, I'm only one book deep, which I can already see it like fantastically. Which I'm so glad that you redid these covers, and what we're gonna get into that.
Yeah.
But it just brings so much influence to so many people. Kind of, just gives that influence. I don't know. I can't really find a way around saying just that influence that gives people to get through their shit.
Like when I did first the first book, um, I put a lot of thought into that, and I put a lot of thought into reception. Oh yeah, there it is.
That's beautiful,
And
dude. Finding.
and I worried a lot about, you know, is this going to be relatable? Is it not going to be relatable? And whatever. And then when I got into the second book goes a lot deeper into every one of the characters, and I really drove hard into just the depth of everything. And because of that, it's what ended up, making a lot of people say they're just starting a pitchfork party to hunt me down. But at the same time, I stopped caring so much about hoping that it might relate to some people, and I drove deeper into it for the people that I know that it will, help them out or that they'll understand. There might be people out there that read my book and just go, "These characters are doing shit that don't make sense." But then the other people that read it, that get it, they're gonna be like,
Mm.
it's there.
I think
And
that any author that feels that kind of passion you do to write to those writers, man, you're doing the right thing because look, nobody's gonna like not everybody's gonna dig it. And for those people that
yeah,
do, there's so many of those people that will.
yeah, I've come to grips with the fact that there's a large chance that I might not be a full time author or blow up and be successful at this. But if I can write what I want to write, how I want to write it, and tell the story I want to, and have my characters do and be how I want, and then I get fans out of that. Like I'm
Dude,
good. I'm good with that.
I think
So
this is a good time to kind of go into what this talk is really about. Not that it's not about what we do. Obviously, anybody that's been watching knows how passionately we just talked about those themes. But
mhm.
so you okay? So you put these. How many books did you put out with your covers?
I put out one. The
Okay,
pre-order for the novella was out, so it was on the way to release, and then I had revealed the cover for book two. So I was
okay,
writing book two at the time.
okay. Real
Um,
quick before I
but it's,
forget, real quick. Sorry. You may be aware of span of control, scope of influence, and field of awareness. Anything beyond your line of sight gets hard to synthesize. Yes, it does. Yes, I totally agree with that, man. Anything that you don't live or that you don't understand or that you haven't seen in your life or experienced, I totally agree. Continue, my man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's a good point, Yo. So I actually had released the first book. So I released in June, and then the Black Friday sale was going on. That I believe it was it Joel Silva was putting on with.
I think
Um,
so. It was like Annie
I think it was
Peliquin and
and I think it was a what's his name? I'm terrible at names. Was
me
it
too.
James A. Doolin? Um,
Yeah, James
but
Doolin.
they
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
they were doing a Black Friday sale, and they asked if anybody wanted to put some up there, and I submitted mine, and I was like, yes. And then I got the email that mine was going to go through and get put on the site and everything. And I was ecstatic just to have my book up there.
Yeah.
And then they put these little banners together that showed everybody's cover on it. And I was excited immediately when I saw mine up there with everybody else's. And then I took a step back and I thought, that looks weak. That looks shitty. I was proud of the cover I had made. I drew the dragon and everything by hand. It was a tribalistic tattoo
I know you
style
put a lot
dragon.
into it. I know you did.
But then when I saw it up there, it just looked cheap, and I wasn't having that. So I knew
So
immediately
from that,
I was gonna change it. Mhm.
yeah. So from that, you kind of felt like, hey, I'm an author. Tell me if I'm wrong, please. But like, this is what I saw in this kind of. The reason I got a hold of you for this chat, man, I saw your covers, and like what you said is true. They're good. They're not bad. But
Yeah.
you put your time into writing, my guy, and there are these
Hmm.
people, right, that and as an indie author, you pay for everything. You put your time into the
Yep.
writing, and you want to do things right, and sometimes to kind of cut that cost down, you may try to do your own covers, right? And
Yeah.
you backed up and you said, I don't like these covers, I'm going to hire somebody.
But see, the funny thing is like I'm actually a cover artist. Like I I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a traditional artist in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be able to draw you something or paint something. So I've always done a lot of covers that were they had a symbol or I wish I could pull it up. Like my next novella is coming out. I just did the cover for that one,
Oh, what up?
and
What up?
it's very simple.
So is it any of the pictures you sent me? Because real quick, I'll throw my. Is it that one?
Nope, but I can send it to you real quick.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, send it to me and I'll
Let's
throw
see.
it up. Throw it to my email. I'll throw it up. So while you're doing that, answer this question if you could. My brother-in-law wants to know, how do you go about your character creation? Is it difficult writing the characters in your book, naming them and backstories?
So I spent about 2 years doing the entire world building for my books for this series, and I started with the idea of basically the plot. I wanted to have a the dragon mage essentially, and I wanted the dragon mage to be prophesized to destroy the world, which is something that's different than every other dragon rider that's out there. So then I immediately went into my main character, and when I first started writing it, I was writing it as a YA series, and he was young. He was like 20.
Hmm.
So when he was young like that, I wrote 72,000 words, I believe, and then I sat back and I thought, it's not really working. I wanted to I wanted to lean into that brutality of the world and the war and everything like that. So I deleted 72,000 words and I started over, and I made my main character Ark 32 years old. And I sat down and I thought what I wanted him to be, and I knew that I wanted him to be confident and competent as a soldier, and then to have his world flipped upside down. So I started with Ark, the main character, and I started building his character, and being somebody that's been in the military for 16 years. he's seen a lot of stuff. He's done a lot of stuff. He's a little bit more stoic and serious, but at the same time, he's very logical. And in the sense of, I do a lot of things with arc that a lot of people don't do. Like a lot of people will lean into like a classic plot or trope point, and then where my main character, like especially like a TV show, will do it. So to give a little bit of a spoiler, a little bit. So like when the bad guy comes to Ark and is like, "Hey, join me," and I'll, he starts trying to entice him with all this stuff. And a lot of books, for a little while of the story or TV shows, they'll go with him, and then they realize they're the bad guy. But Arik already pretty much seen how he is, his personality up front and up close, and immediately at the beginning of the book, he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that." And so he just constantly always goes against the the flow of what I think is normal in books, and maybe a lot of people don't like that about Arik, but so then I took his character and then I thought about the other characters in the stories and how I wanted them to go in pairing or in contrast to Arik. And so what that did was allowed me to start building the other main cast and the supporting cast and things like that. And um, as far as like naming characters for me is always really, really easy to do. I don't know, a name pops in my head, or I'll just type some letters real quick and see if it don't look right and scramble them. And then then I come up with a name for them. But
so I've heard like I think I was talking to Chiago Abdallah. He's like, man, like I keyboard smash, like that's his, like he's like I just smash keyboard, and if it looks and like I can pronounce it, that's kind of what I go with.
Now, like some of my other characters, like my orcs or my elves, but I do their names a little differently. What I'll do is I'll go and translate a name, a word, and for the elves I translate to Finnish, and then for the orcs I translate to Swedish, and then I mash it with Dutch, and then I flip the letters around a little bit and I put apostrophe in there, and then it looks fancy. So
what you sent me, by the way, real quick, is for some reason the picture won't show up. It's like the actual like novella EPUB or something like that, which is all good because we've got. If you do want to send it, we've got some questions real quick. Tim says, "Cover envy is so real, man. You did a wonderful job. I think that you did. You hired the perfect person for your novels."
See, it's funny because I didn't hire her initially.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So after my covers,
Shelly Campbell, by the way, Shelly Campbell, guys.
Yeah. Yep. And so after my covers flopped, in my eyes, and I wanted to get something new, I took them down, and I went to a website and I bought some blank background images of dragons. There was like 4 or 5 of them that this artist put on there, and then I redid the covers. I did them in the white with those new covers on them, and that initially was what sparked the interest in my series for a lot of people. It got shared a lot. I think like one of my tweets had like 10,000 views on it or something like that.
That's big on Twitter. Dude.
So, and it was a lot of people sharing it over and over and over. And then another author reached out to me and was like, "I think there might be AI," and I was pretty devastated from that because I'm really
real quick, make sure
AI.
So I understand. Like, so you had the covers you did, and then another cover, and you found out it was an AI.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
it's highly looked down upon if anybody who's watching doesn't realize that, like an indie author, especially who does everything themselves, like an AI cover, from what I understand, is usually looked down upon.
Yeah, and for the most part, it is. There's a pretty big controversy about the whole thing, but so when I saw that it was going to be AI, I was pretty devastated about it, and immediately went back through and started deleting all the tweets of those images that I put up that everybody was sharing, and put out a thing and
Oh,
said that
that's got to
I'm,
be
you know,
devastating, dude.
it was, and especially after my book was getting, you know, maybe 10 sales a month, like a couple hundred page reads, and so to go from that
You're
and then
right.
to see this huge hype for it, and you know, I could have been like, no, I'm just going to use them,
You
but
could have had,
you know, I'm
yeah,
against
that's
that.
balls.
So I took them down, and I went to Canva and I started looking up different images and stuff like that, royalty free images, and I was going to build something new. And Shelly reached out to me, and she said
Oh,
that she would redo the dragons for me of the novella and Whispers of Warbreaker for free. So she went
look
ahead
at that,
and
ladies.
she went ahead and did them for free, no charge of me. And
Wow. Tell
I credit
people
her
what
for,
it usually costs for a cover, dude.
well, just the, like, I did the whole cover part of it. Like Shelly
Uh-huh.
did the dragon, right? So I did
Yeah.
the whole background, the typography and everything. Yeah. But the dragon alone, is, you know, that's $200. Well,
Dude, at
you know,
least.
$100 on a super ridiculous deal on it, especially the
Yeah.
amount of detail and the way that she asked me questions about the dragons
Because
and
she
got the
put like
detailing of
her
it.
doing that art in like a video, dude. And it wasn't a quick
Yeah,
thing. Like she took her time with
no,
that.
it was like, yeah, it was like I think this one was 8 hours that she did.
Yeah, dude.
Um, and like she took a lot of the details, like the dragon of Ashes of an Empire. That's Karn. And Karn was a 400-year-old dragon, so he's older. He's massive. And then we get into Eldris from Whispers of Warbreaker, and he's young, you know, he's younger, and he's got that sparkle in his eye. You know,
Oh,
he looks determined. But just the amount of detailing in it that she put into it and brought these dragons to life for me, I couldn't do anything but tell her that, you know, I'm gonna. So then I hired her on, so
for
that she
those who
did.
don't know, too, like not only is she a gangster at like doing this art thing, man. I'm reading, what the hell am I reading by her? Something of a lesser moon. I have to look it up. But it is
Yeah,
just that sweetness of dark, man. So why I bring that up is she's amazing with doing this illustrator thing. But she's also a wonderful. I wish she was here to hear that.
I know.
I'll have her on the channel. But I wish she was here to hear this because I
She's
wanted
a
to tell it.
she's a horror she's a horror
Yeah,
author as well.
yeah. She's a
Um,
horror author. Yeah.
so she you know, I credit her for saving these covers, of giving me these covers that are just amazing. And so she did Bloods of a Withering Kingdom, and then now she did the next one that's coming out that I just did the cover reveal for, which is Embers of a Fractured Soul, was book 3. And right now she is working on the cover for the 4th book.
Heck yeah,
And
dude.
so I made up my mind right there that I'm going to hire her for everything. So
That's amazing.
I'm getting ready to switch over to Ingram Spark, because my books are getting bigger than KDP can handle, at least for
So
the
is this
hardcovers.
is this a KDP?
That's a KDP. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually had to be. I had to shrink the font on that one a little bit to get it into the
Okay.
page count limit.
It's still not that small
And
though. Like I have
I
smaller,
know,
dude.
and that's why book 2 has not got the hardcover out yet,
Okay.
because the page count is too big. So I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna do. I have a choice to do dust jacket stuff like that, but for the people that have already got book 1 in hardcover, I'm just gonna do naked hardcovers
Dude,
to try to
it's
match
beautiful.
other
It's
people's.
freaking gorgeous, dude.
And in redoing them and re-release them through Ingram, Shelly is also working right now on custom art. I'm hiring her to do custom art throughout this whole series as well.
So
Eventually,
how
one
has
of these days,
go ahead.
one of these days I'm gonna do a special edition. I don't know if it'll be once the first quartet's done or what, but I'll do a special edition of the first book, and I'm gonna hire her to do just a slew of art for me.
I think that you've done such a wonderful job with the writing and putting your time into making sure this is a good book. Like that, absolutely will have a lot by, especially by then. But go through. I know what I saw, but go through your experience of how uh, the your sales have went from when you did the covers to having Shelly help out with them, because just what you've shared on or X, man, I've seen quite the difference.
Yeah, and every month this year has been better than the last. And every
That's
time I think it's going to tank, it feels like it's going to tank in the first week or so, and it always just comes right back around. But so that was November-ish when I started to switch my covers, and I believe December was when she had the first book done. And in December, I celebrated my first month of hitting 10,000 page reads on Kindle Unlimited for a month. And I also celebrated, I believe the same month was the first month that I had hit $150 on royalties.
Yeah.
And that was December. Last month, I celebrated my first $600 month.
I saw that.
Which was,
and for people who don't know, that it takes a lot of sales.
Yeah, and it was almost $700. So December I went from 10,000 page reads to last month I had 130,000 page reads.
That's it. That's that number.
And then this month is already projecting better than last month, which I thought it was going to tank this month, but it did not. So
well, you're human, man.
As far as like numbers go, like I'm 10 times the amount of page reads I had.
So reviews are from 100% to like 10,000%, guys. Like, it's incredible, dude. It's incredible.
Yeah. So it's and with each release, you know, it's gonna get better and better and better. Like Whispers of Warbreaker, we just June 12th was I claimed June 12th as El Marion Day. That was the anniversary of when the first book came out. And yesterday I hit 400,000 page reads on the first book. So the second book is right now, I think probably in the next week, it'll crack 150,000 page reads already.
That's a lot for a second book too, especially as an indie author.
Yeah. So I put so much into book 2 that a lot of the reviews have said that my book has skipped that, you know, the pitfall of the sequel syndrome that they call it.
Well, and like that middle book syndrome, kind of like we gotta fill in some words. Yeah, dude. Yes.
Yeah, I dreaded that so bad. I thought, like, so many second books or a third book in a 5-book series, like, you know, they drag. I mean, even my favorite series, you know, Inheritance Cycle. You know, the second book of that one, there was a lot of dragging in that one, and so I worried about that a lot. And then just going through and making sure that so much of the book itself pushed the story forward. There was no fluff. I'm an underwriter usually.
Oh,
so,
really? That's incredible.
Yeah. So when I usually get to beta reading and things like that, I'm usually adding. This Bloods of a Withering Kingdom book 2 was the first book that the page count from first draft to final draft was only like a 3,000 word difference. It was very close.
And you usually,
I'm not sure if that means
the typical story I hear is like from first draft to like second draft thereon is like a huge cut, like 40,000 word cut. So for him to add words is especially different.
So I usually, like, you know, I'll have my chapters and plot it out, whatever, and then I'll get through this whole scene that I want it to be, and then when I'm going through beta, a lot of times my alphas, my betas are like, you need to, you know, add a little bit more depth to this. So then
what's the page count limit for KDP? EL wants to know.
So the paperback page count limit, I believe, is 823, but the hardcover, which they're still saying they're in beta, but the hardcover page limit, I believe, is 550 pages.
Wow, really? That's small.
Yeah.
Epic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, you know, that's across their platform. And I'm not sure if that number was pulled out based off of their algorithms of, you know, the average, you know, book page length that was getting put out. You know, fantasy is just one of the genres. You look at horror, YA, of course, so many genres, romance, like, dude, their page counts are usually not that high. So
yeah, that's so a lot of people. She thought I was trying to say that like fantasy or epic fantasy was like technically better. It's all subjective. Like I wasn't saying that at all. It's like she reads a lot of like murder mystery, like Frida McFadden, who have like 120 max thousand word count. Like you get to epic fantasy, it has to be epic. That's what we expect, right? We expect those chunkers, right? And that's what we love: character depth. We like world building.
I had went back and forth for a long time on what I wanted to be for my page count, and I'm a person that likes to see a book get bigger and, you know, add more depth, more perspectives, just expanding every time. I like to see, you know, go bigger every time.
It makes perfect sense that you're a Ryan Cahill fan, dude. The guy's got bricks, dude.
I know. So when I wrote book two ended up at 186,000 words on the final draft.
Chunker.
And I thought, when I was writing it, I thought, you know, that seemed huge. And then after it released, I thought, I didn't even hit 200,000 words. Like it just seemed small to me now. So then I started plotting out book three, and book three now is projecting about 240,000 words.
That I can see it.
Which is about 800 pages or so. And then I've already plotted out book four. Book four is projecting about 320,000 words.
Isn't Ryan's last like first draft, the one he's working on now, like 400,000 freaking words?
Yeah, I believe so. He did. I believe it was like 430,000 words, something like that, for Of War and Ruin.
Dude. I mean,
a lot of people have asked him.
Studs on my bookshelf for his shit.
A lot of people have asked him if the next book's gonna be about the same, and he said it won't be any smaller. So, dude, which is crazy because a lot of there's gonna be people that knock everything, but so many people see that page count and they're like, oh, you know, you can cut, you know, a quarter of that book down. And sure, that's what Sanderson just did. Sanderson's final draft for Stormlight 5 is like 500,000 words.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. And he said his
final, and he's going to cut about 100,000 words. He said,
God,
to get to the final draft. That's insane to me.
That is nuts.
So when you read Of War and Ruin, you know, if you're a fan of the series, you've made it that far.
But that's by the end of Of War and Ruin, start loving him, dude.
I didn't want Of War and Ruin to end, and that was 1,400 pages.
Yeah.
So dude, you know you're doing something spectacular when you know you can come across 1,400 pages and not want it to be done.
Look, Mike's book reviews is somebody I pay close attention to, and he's one of the reasons I'm here, man. And for him to like, hey, he said the same thing, like War and Ruin, which is huge, just like this thick, dude. He just didn't want it to end. He said that he expanded to a point that was so readable, but so vast.
Yeah, and Ryan's it sucks that so many people are so judgmental on the first few books or whatever, because if you look at Ryan's writing from, you know, if you start with The Fall or if you start with A Blood and Fire, it don't matter. If you go from that to Of War and Ruin, like his writing is so much better. It's so much cleaner. The emotional. No, I mean, even the first book you read, it's, you know, in my opinion, it was great. You know, coming from a sense of, you know, for me to be a Dragon Riders, you know, fan, and then to get something that felt a little bit more mature with The Bound and the Broken,
with some F words and some violence. Yes, exactly.
So if you look at like the maturity difference between Aragon and A Blood and Fire, and then go from A Blood and Fire to Whispers of a Worldbreaker, so like that's that change of you know, maturity of darkness that I lean into a little bit more.
I love that though. You're making your stuff different. You make it what you want to make it, man.
Yeah, and you know, I never want to feel like I'm copying somebody else. Like I have written down parts before, and then, you know, I've had beta readers be like, that's the exact same thing that happened in this book, and I'll just straight up delete it. I'll delete it and figure out a different way to do it, because I don't want to. I never want to copy. At the same time, that also gives me a way.
I have not felt that, especially through book one. Like I haven't started book two yet, but through book one, it's not like anything I've read. It's darker.
A lot of people say they start it and it feels like Aragon, and then by like
now, see, I have not read Aragon. I have not read Aragon.
It makes sense to me because
YA series, which is Aragon, it is a very YA. could feel anything like this, because it's not, dude.
Yeah.
Like the first 50 pages, you find out some information that's very, very adult.
Yeah. So like I like trying to my stories are never going to be a slow burn type of feel. I have liked that in the past, especially with like the Wheel of Time and even the Bound of the Broken or Aragon. There's this lull series throughout the beginning where you're kind of getting introduced to this world, and it feels enticing. It feels nostalgic, and I
That's key.
would like to go for something like that. But at the same time, my books always start out by throwing you in the fire.
Oh,
So
yeah, dude. And that's what I loved about it. Honestly, like I said, that first 50 pages, man, that's what makes yours. I've read enough dragon stuff that I can say. I haven't read like Aragon, but I've
mhm.
read Ascending or Ascendant. I've read Dragon Mage, which is, oh my god, it's so good. Have you read Dragon Mage?
I have not yet. I have it on my Audible. I haven't got to start
Holy
yet.
shit. Let me just tell
I,
you, prepare to have a top 5 book at least, maybe top 3, dude.
yeah,
Dude,
I've
ML
heard a
Spencer's
lot
a
of
gangster.
praise for that. Yeah.
Holy shit. And it's not like
So
the dragon rider that you're expecting. Like, you don't meet dragons for a while.
yeah. So like Whispers of Worldbreaker starts out. Um, it's just a couple guys in the trench. They're talking military talk, kind of talking shit to each
Yeah.
other, and then it hits the fan real quick. So throughout basically chapters 2 through 7,
Yeah.
it's chaos, and
Chaos.
then if you go to my novella Ashes of a Risen Empire, it literally starts out with there's an attack. So you get the cliffhanger of book 1, and then book 2 starts out. The first 9 chapters of book 2 are battles. It's arc fighting tooth and nail for the first 9 chapters.
What up,
Going
Scott?
into book 3, so then we get into book 3 that I'm writing now, and book 3, it it is a lot shorter of a battle, but it is the highest stakes that you've seen yet in a
Oh,
battle. So the first opening chapter of chapter 3 is meant to really just get your heart
I'm
pounded,
pumped.
and then in book 2 I had an 8 chapter battle across 4 different POVs. That was fun to write.
So,
That was
so
wild.
real quick, like, do you enjoy the multiple POV style? Do you
I
enjoy
do.
that?
I do, and I enjoy writing them more the more I write. Like book 1 has basically 3 POVs. So you have Moro, you have his adopted brother, or you have Auric, and you have his adopted brother Moro, and then you have Dauntless. And
That has an
Sir
audiobook.
Dauntless, huh?
That
Oh,
has an audiobook.
yeah. So and Dauntless is way different. Like his location, everything, he's way different. In the first book, a lot of people have told me like they don't know how to take Dauntless. They don't understand where he fits. So then in book 2, Dauntless gets a lot more chapters, and
Okay.
you understand how he fits into the whole perspective of the story. But book 2 jumped up to, I believe, 6 POVs total.
Okay. I like that.
And then
I'm a
so for
POV
book
freak, dude. I love
so
it.
for book 3 I have 9 POVs in the plot lines.
My
And
dude.
then I have 11 planned for book 4.
I
So
love that, dude.
the more I write, the more I like doing it, because I feel like you can get a real big epic story from 1 or 2, sure. But
Sure.
when you have like 7, 8, 9 of them, and they're thousands of miles apart, and this whole story that you're trying to understand how it's coming together, and then everything comes together and it clicks.
That's it.
It's so satisfying to see all the characters come together and you see how they all fit when you were trying to figure it out along.
That intersection, especially
Yeah.
if you could pull it off, man. Like, so many characters, and again, what Ryan does well, what George R. R. Martin does well, what Anthony Ryan does well, what so many others with the point of views do well. is they
Mhm.
hit that point in a book where all of these even if they're not in the same time or the same
Yeah.
space or the same, like they all come together at something, and it's like, oh my god, holy shit, what just happened, right? That's it.
And
That's the
especially
reason we read.
if you see something that one character does, and even if they don't interact with the other characters, but you see the effects of what they've done affect other
Exactly.
people. So I did that in the first book. In the first book, there's a bit of a part where it seems like something random just happens. I won't tell you what
Okay.
it is, but
Yep.
it seems like
I'm
something
thinking.
random happens towards about three-quarters of the way in, and you're trying to figure out where it fits. And then in book two, well, halfway through book two, you see why that happened, and you see
Okay.
the consequences of that happen, and you see the effects of what happened on other people. So
Oh,
it's a little bit of that ripple effect that I was talking about. I like to do that. I like to take
I like
um
the. I find it incredibly fascinating because I have an idea of what you're talking about. That you put that over a couple books, man, because it didn't take away from book one's story at all. But
right.
what is even cooler is like looking forward to that book two, where I find more out. That is where it's at. That is the anticipation.
So I like the butterfly effect analogy too, and I
Ooh,
do that a lot in this book. There are so many things that happen in book one that even in book two that seem so uh, I don't want to say random. They don't seem random, but they seem like there was some one-off thing that, in retrospect, didn't matter. And you'll find out later that they had huge consequences on that area. On so, like in the first book, Ark does something to the druids. He doesn't mean to, but then he gets away, and it
mm,
feels like, oh, he just got away with it, and nothing's gonna come out of it. But that fire is definitely coming back to burn his ass in books three and four, and it does that through all these characters. I like to think of the people that they've left behind, after battles, and I take the ideas of where they, what happened to all of them,
you know
what
what
happened to this
sucks, man?
character.
I just thought of this, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to say the the fact that I could have just dismissed reading like so easy, and I did for so long, man. And to have these stories that you write and so many other people write, just have it just excites me, dude. I'm sure you feel that exact like anybody who's
Oh
watching
yeah,
or yeah, it just is exciting, man. And I had no idea that the written word could be so powerful. I was like, it's made up. It doesn't even exist. It don't matter. You get so involved and there's no choice.
mm,
You have a choice. I'm just so
yeah.
happy to talk to guys like you, man, that make that shit possible because it's exciting, dude. It is. I love hearing about what I'm going to read from you and why you wrote it and what's to come and why it's to come and what inspires you. Uh, totally off the wall rant that I just went on, but I just was thinking of it. Just excites me, dude.
So that yeah, brings me back to something you started saying at the beginning was about how many books this series is going to be.
Mm,
And a lot of people have asked me, how many books are you going to have? And I've put a lot of thought into how many books I
I'm
want.
sure you have.
So my original plan was 6 books.
Uh-huh.
And instead of six, I took the idea of those 6 books and condensed them into four, which is why
I
books three
think
and
that's
four are so
good.
long. So I'm going to have 2 quartets. So you're going to have the first 4 books of Elmerian Chronicles, and that is going to be called The Era of the Worldbreaker. And then you're going to get a second quartet of books, The Era of the World Mender. And that will take place about 300 years after book 4, but it's
What that
still within
does
the
really
same.
quick is put in the reader's mind a beginning and an end and a reason. Go ahead.
So it's going to. It's not a sequel series. It's all part of the same series.
Mhm.
In the same retrospect of my Ashes of a Risen Empire, my novella,
Uh-huh.
the story of Tyrion starts out 400 years before Whispers of Warbreaker. Tyrion is 1,000 years old. So what it's basically doing is if you go from Ashes of a Risen Empire to the final book of the eighth book in Elmerian Chronicles, we're going to span about 1,500 years.
Mhm.
But you get the first 4 books that'll take place within about a 2-year period, and then the final books will take place across about a 3-year period.
Okay.
So you get these, you're really only getting like these glimpses, but you're seeing this massive effect that it's had across the entire world, across 1,500 years. And
There's another
so,
series I'm reading like that, and I have the same plan trajectory in my head, man. I really think this is going to happen. Christopher Rocchio does a very, very similar thing with his years. I'm sure you've heard of Sun Eater.
yeah, I haven't got to start yet, but
He
I shouldn't
puts
say.
all of these years into glimpses, and
Yeah.
I have a very same trajectory for you, my friend.
So, so from the beginning of basically plotting this out, the second quartet was going to be it was going to be a sequel series, but some of the characters from the first 4 books will overlap into the second, which is why it's just one continuous series. So there'll be 8 books total, 8 novels, and either 8 or 9 novellas total across all those. So we're looking at 18 or 19 books.
So
total.
what are you going to do with the novellas?
So the novellas, each novella will follow a different character in a different point in time, and how what they went through, how it affects the novels. So the novellas themselves, they're never going to be a mandatory read to understand the novels, but they are going to expand on something and make you understand a lot better. So like the first one followed Tyrion, and you understand why Tyrion is the way he is. It's a short read; it's only like 70 pages, but you get this jump across 4 different time periods throughout the 70 pages, and you understand all the pain and the loss that Tyrion went through and why he becomes who he becomes throughout the main series. The novella I'm writing right now, which I just sent it to you too. I don't know if you got the second one or not.
If
novella I'm
that's
writing
the one
right
you
now.
sent, I'm throwing that to my Kindle as soon as we're done, for sure.
So the new one that I'm writing follows the dwarves, and that story takes place about 100 years before Whispers of Warbreaker. It actually takes place right about the ending of the first novella.
Tyrion Lannister.
It follows characters. So it follows characters that are not they're not part of the novels, but what they go through will show up a bunch of things that that the dwarves deal with throughout the main novels. A lot of their history is built into all that. So each novella will be a different character and follow, basically a piece of the story that makes you understand things from a different perspective. And I do that a lot throughout the series.
What people are, so this is just kind of like a personal guess, or I'm just going to throw this in there. Like, the reason I started reading Ryan Cahill, who is obviously a huge influence to a lot of people, especially you, like, I read The Fall. I have now people are going to be able to read that first novella, correct, and then go into book 1.
Yeah.
That gives people a taste of your writing, dude, and that is so key. And then those other novellas where are kind of essential for you to read the series are going to grow those diehard fans. I'm going to follow everything you're doing because I'm so involved in this series type thing, man. Like, that's a great idea.
Like when you go with Ryan's, like with Ryan, you get The Fall, and The Fall, takes place like 400 years before Blood and Fire.
Yeah.
You do get a lot of backstory, especially with Aeson and things like that. And then you get into his second novella, The Exile, and that one follows Dane. And
I haven't read Exile.
if you skip that one, and then you get into, I believe he comes in Of Darkness and Light, but if you skip that novella, he seems like a character that just comes out of the blue, and you still get a piece of his backstory, in the main novels, even if you don't read the novellas. But if you read the novella, you get so much depth of Dane, and then we get into the ice, and then with the ice, you follow Aeson, and you understand after after Of War and Ruin, I really liked Aeson up until the ending
Don't
of
you
War and Ruin.
ruin it for me. I have not read Roll and Ruin yet. Don't you ruin it.
So so there's a big part of Aeson that it seems so random, or not random, but it seems uncharacteristic, maybe. But then you get the ice that came, that was released after, and you understand so much of why Aeson did what he did in book 3.
Ooh.
You get that with the ice, and so Of War and Ruin made me go from wanting to punch Aeson to getting into the ice, and Aeson becoming a character that I will definitely root for in book 4. And
Dude,
Ryan's really good at doing that. So
I think that's a great point because of War and Ruin came out, and then the ice just came out, and then he just released the blood that burns the winter snow.
Yep. And
Now I
that one
haven't
was
read that either.
now that one's a little bit different because that one follows Vars, and it's not so much a story that
Is it
it
kind of
really has a
like
big.
different?
Yeah, it is different. It's really short, but it follows Vars like a couple years before A Blood and Fire.
No,
So like
I
Kalen is
liked
still
Vars,
just.
dude. The short time that he was in of Blood and Fire, man, I dug
Yeah.
Vars. He was like the father, man. He was the man.
So that story was a lot different because it doesn't have like this big effect on the whole plot of the Bound and the Broken, but you understand why Kalen is the way he is. You understand the father that he had,
And it
and
gave
Ryan's
his
really good at.
readers a little something to snack on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Man,
So
that's a,
while Ryan does that with his novellas, mine don't so much lean into. Um, I guess they kind of do the same thing because like my novella I'm writing right now doesn't follow characters that are in the novels. It's characters that came before.
okay.
But
No, that's not the same
you get it.
thing.
Yeah. So you get a big sense of the dwarves because this whole story is with dwarves. Like, there's no dragons in this one. So a lot of people really like my dwarves in book 2. So I was kind of pushed a little bit by my alphas to do this one. And this story takes place 100 years before the first book, but what it does is it showcases the um, the strife that the dwarves have endured for the last century. So when you finally get to see the dwarves, you understand their history more than you understand a certain character's origin. So this one's more about the culture of the people, their honor, and their depth. But a lot of the little things I put into it are really rich in lore of this world that goes back thousands of years. A lot of the things they talk about. There's a trilogy that I'm going to write at some point that follows Throlder. And Throlder was a dwarf from about 4,000 years ago, but there was a war between a massive war that lasted years between the dwarves and the dragons.
Are you still writing
They
this at work, dude?
What's that?
You still writing this at work, like on your breaks?
Yep.
That's incredible. And so you guys that don't know, man, like this dude's writing books like on his break. He ain't taking a break. He's writing his books. That's incredible.
It's a lot faster that way.
Hey, you're taking advantage of the time that you have, and that shows aspiration and ambition, dude. Passion. That's where it's at, man.
So my novellas will be more world centric than most people's are. Most people's are lean more into characters, and mine are more just to give you this massive lore that I spent a couple years building for the world.
I love it. I love there's I'm going to talk about a couple things I love. I loved book 1. I can't wait to get to book 2 and also I think I'm going to read the novella first. I'm going to read the novella and then go to book 2. That's what I'm going to do. So,
and that's what I always like when people read book 1 and then the novella. Because if you read the novella and you get an Tyrion story, and then you're like, okay. Then you get into book 2, and Tyrion is barely mentioned in book 1. and you're like, okay, well, how's he? I always get the impression that people are like, how does he fit?
Mm-hmm.
But if you read book one first, especially when you get to the ending of book one, and you understand what Tyrion has done, and then you read the novella and you see where he comes from, it gives a lot better perspective of, oh shit, instead of wondering. It's almost a fear type reaction that I get. So
See,
I
that's
always
going to
like
be an
people to read.
amazing moment.
I always like people to read book one and then the novella.
All
But
right.
I mean, people
So,
can read it any way they want to. But
yeah, no, for sure. But so review for book one's coming within the next couple of days. I tried to have it out today. I wasn't able to,
I
but
appreciate
coming
that.
very soon. Absolutely, dude. A couple things I loved. The reason I did this, man. Number one, you were one of the very first people to come on my channel and talk, man. I'm so happy to have you back, dude. It's just been incredible because for many reasons. But I think that people that are as passionate as you are about doing what you do is always what I'm after with this channel is learning, because I want to write, dude. I want to write and learning from what you've done and so many others. That's why I do interviews. That's why I love interviews, especially live ones. We get that
Yeah,
genuine feel of what people are here for.
yeah,
What I also loved is seeing that huge transition between you and reinventing yourself. You
yeah,
reinvented the covers, and not that had much to do with the writing, but what you did
yeah,
was a marketing essential. What you did was realize
yeah,
what you needed to do to market, and that I think is a huge part of being an indie author, dude. Huge, if not
yeah.
the most important. Um,
That's why I like indie so much. You know, with indie, there's a lot of pressure that's put on you to do a lot of things like the
everything,
marketing. Um, but at the same time, you have the advantage that it is in your control.
yeah.
And you know, being indie is what allowed me to just, I'm gonna go change my covers,
That's it.
or
You
change my price, and
you didn't have
so you're
somebody
constantly,
chirping in your ear.
so you always want to you do your research and then try to figure out what works for you, because what works for you for marketing might do nothing for the next author. And
And
like
you have the
I've
advantage of knowing that.
yeah, so I've taken a lot of advice from Ryan, and his videos, and just talking to Ryan and stuff like that. And
He's a good dude.
um, I've watched a lot of things from traditional authors as well. I follow a lot of those on
Yeah,
Twitter or
yeah.
YouTube.
You're all authors.
Yeah, so it's always important to just to figure out where your comfort zone is, and if that's working, then cool. If it's not, then it's time to get uncomfortable and figure out what works.
Oh, right there.
So
Time to get uncomfortable. That is what we are going to say is the statement of the interview. Time to get uncomfortable, because that's where we make the most progression, guys. That is why I started doing live interviews. You think this is comfortable at first? Hell no. Watch the first ones. Um, but man, Corey, I want to thank you, man, because this has been exactly what I knew it was. It's just so fun. So I can't wait to have you back, brother. Can't wait to see you keep that upward trajectory that I know you will. Thank you all for being here, that we're live, commenting, and being wonderful like you always do. For anybody that watches this on replay, you're wonderful as well. Leave your comment, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And we'll be back very soon. I have most of the next interviews are in July. So for the next few days, I don't have a lot coming up, but we'll see what we can fit in there, because I have some open days. So you guys have a wonderful night, morning, afternoon, wherever you're at. Corey, you're the man. Thank you for hopping in here and really sharing some wisdom. And we'll talk soon, guys.
thanks for having me on.